or things, thank you, Lori, that if you've got some comments or things, please put it in the chat window. We'll be monitoring that as we go. This is my introduction for today and a little bit of background about ISBM and a little bit of just riffing on change before Lara joins us. All right, so let me hit in here. Okay, let's see if I can make that go. There we go. Okay, so you all who are early probably know this, but let me just say for the record, you're joined ISBM, the Institute for the Study of Business Markets. We were founded in 1982 at Penn State, a collection of academics and B2B companies that felt like there was just not enough research in the B2B marketing space, which may still be the case. And the whole purpose was to advance the science of B2B marketing. So we're here to accelerate the development and adoption of innovation and marketing best practices for the benefit of our B2B companies that are members. And so we support research, and you'll hear about some of that research that we've supported today, and we continue to do so. And we look for our member companies to help us drive what is needed. So we're always talking to you all about what do we need to learn more about, what do we need to be working on, and how do we help each other get there. Here's some pictures of who is part of the ISBM leadership team. I'm speaking, that's Lynn. And Ren Mendez is on the call. He's our executive director and talks to you as all the members. And Becky Williams is with us. She's our curriculum director. On the academic side, Stefan is now our director of ISBM at Penn State. He directs where the research funds go and how we do them. I'm going to skip Lori for a minute. Ralph Oliva is my immediate past predecessor, and he was the director of the corporate membership before me. Ralph will actually be with us at this meeting. We thought he was going to travel, but like all good plans in the last 20 months, they get changed. So he'll be with us at lunchtime today. And Gary Lillian is Stefan's immediate past predecessor, and he is still with us and helps us. Lori Nicolini, who I saved for last, is the person who actually does everything. And she's behind the scenes, and she's who you want to talk to if you need anything, because she's always watching for everyone. Our organization is also made up of ISBM fellows, and this has started in the earliest days, and we have over 30 fellows. I'm going to lose the number. We just inducted 2 new ones. Normally, our fellows would have been inducted at a meeting at ISBM, but of course, we haven't had any physical meetings. So we did an induction, which is still virtual. And 2 new fellows will be with us for some discussion, as well as one of them giving us a presentation during this time. As a member of ISBM, one of the benefits of being a member of ISBM is that you can talk to these fellows. They're available to you. So if you need some help and there's an expertise that they have, we'll be happy to put you guys together in order to resolve or learn or improve things. Okay, so this is my little discussion. I start thinking about these meetings, and I start thinking about what should I be talking about here? And honestly, there has been no other topics to talk about lately except for when will this end? And I was thinking about the whole bit of this and looking through a couple of other books and things, and this little joke came in, which is the past, the present, and the future walked into a bar, and it was tense. And that may not make you laugh this morning. I was laughing yesterday, but I think I was drinking. Anyway, you'll see what it means in a minute. Okay, so let's go to this next slide. So it feels to me like this is the year that has never ended. And so I reflect back to February of 2020, when this year in my mind has started. And in February of 2020, for the most part, we had no indication of anything unusual coming at us. It was February of 2020. We had, at the end of February, just held our last meeting at Millikan. It was a great meeting. We were planning at ISBM all kinds of great things for the year, and just really had no idea that something was going to change at all. And so when I think about this, I think, well, how is it that the entire world, or at least a large portion of it, is completely unaware that there will be something new happen fairly shortly that will upend everything? This change will happen. And how did we not know it? Or why did we not see it coming? Or even when it did, how do we not manage it well? And a lot of big things that happen, we have some language around that, that makes it memorable. But like 2020 of February 2020, unless your birthday was there or you got married or you had some other event, there's nothing really tremendously memorable about that. But now, a month later in March of 2020, it becomes a memorable event, only in retrospect because of all the things we've done so far. So I'm thinking about the things that make us remember something that was a big thing. And you've probably all heard the discussion about where were you when? Where were you when Kennedy was assassinated? Right. So everybody has that minute in time when you say, I know exactly where I was when I heard that news. Unless, of course, you're a lot younger than I am. And then your version of that is, where were you on 9/11? Right? Both of those were an instant in time where something happened, change occurred, things were different. And afterward, things were never quite the same because of what happened or what happened after what happened. And as I thought about this, I kept thinking, well, what is it that this particular pandemic, which of course we will look back on in some fashion and refer to it in history as something while we're making it every day, we're living in this history that's going to be made every day. Why is it not different? And the more that I thought about this, the more I realized, just in the last split second, that there's a way to think about this. And the way to think about this is a framework. So Rand and I were talking about frameworks, and there's a person on the very first presentation, Lara, that really kicked off the idea of thinking about frameworks. But I'm thinking about changing a framework. And I thought, well, okay, I need to organize this in my head because it's just a little hard to get my mind around that says, how is it again that all the most brilliant people on the planet can completely miss something that's going to change all of us so dramatically, completely miss it all. So it's a 2x2 in my mind. This is a 2x2 framework. If you watched Ralph's presentation, it was one of the top 10 as a framework, a 2x2 framework, just comparing two things, comparing change on one axis and resolution of that change. Resolution being kind of air quoted because sometimes maybe the resolution isn't a resolution, just an adoption of new things, but change eventually propagates through and finds itself somewhere else. There can be a really sudden change. For example, 9/11 was kind of a sudden change. All of a sudden, out of the blue, this thing happened, and then something had to come. Or it could be a really slow change. Something, just think about that frog in the pot of water that, things just keep changing and adding on, and then all of a sudden it bubbles over. And then the resolutions can be quick. Something happens, and then quickly there's something that reacts to that, and then the change is done, and we've got something new. Or it can be a really slow resolution. So then I started thinking about all these major upheavals that we've had, and where do they fall on this map, and why do we as humans deal with them differently? Because they're obviously in these different categories. So when Kennedy was assassinated, well, that was a sudden change with a relatively sudden resolution in that we got a new president and other things happened. But, we never really felt the same about it because this was a recent assassination of someone we knew. 9/11, if you want to include what we just got out of in Afghanistan, might have taken a really long time to resolve itself. And even now, maybe not resolved, but it's changed us dramatically over time. And we've changed a lot of security systems as well as just how we think about the rest of the world. The ones that I'm really thinking about is because I've spent some time over the last 20 months. I've already worked from home before the pandemic, so that wasn't a big change to me, but not being able to go anywhere was not a good thing for me. So when I didn't really want to fly, I got the car and I went to various places in the US because flying overseas wasn't really going to happen. I'm not going to drive that far. And I visited historical sites. And it turns out it was a really good time to do that. Like I went to Colonial Williamsburg. If you haven't been, it's really wonderful. But I went there in the middle of the pandemic of last year, in the end of summer, and it was empty. They were still open, but if you've been there before, you know how crowded it can be. There may have been 100 people in the entire area, and we were able to stay in the hotel right across the street from all of it. which is usually crazy expensive. And it was $120 a night because nobody was there. And it was a wonderful time. And I tend to love asking lots of questions of those folks in the costumes, probably to the annoyance of all the other people that are there, because I want to just know everything. And I learned a lot about everything of that period, as well as, asked a lot of questions like, well, what did they do when they were sick? And then we went to Jamestown, and the 1619 project, of course, had just kind of hit the news. And we were fortunate there that the guy who gave us the tour was the guy who did all the research, because they had to let everybody else go. So there were no more tour guides. We had the actual researcher talking to us with some fabulous insights. And again, it's one of those, wow, what a change happened over that time that we might not even understand. And even today, so 400 years removed from all of this, we're still trying to learn how these changes rolled out and what made us think differently then that now make us even wonder about how we think today. So I'm thinking about all this stuff and then thinking about, so instead of the where were you when question, it's more like, what was it like in the months before something happened that made us think differently, like February of 2020 to March 2020. In May of 1914, we were a bustling country of growth and optimism and wonderful things happening. And then I'm not looking at all your faces. I wish I had that feedback. I really hate this, that we can't see everything while I'm talking to you. But May 1914, do you all know what happened in June? In June, Archduke Ferdinand was killed, and we started World War I, which was called the Great War because we didn't know about World War II yet. So it was renamed later. But in May, nobody knew that we were going to end up in this great world war that killed so many. And it never seemed to end as well. And I don't want to promise that this pandemic is like that, but I'm just thinking that it might be helpful in a construct to think about how we did think about that. Same way in August of 1939, in September of 1939, Hitler invaded Poland, and then we were in World War II. But in August, things looked okay. In March of 1776, so I got to visit Concord also on one of my trips, and that was very, very interesting to see where the British were fired on for the first shot that was heard around the world across this little bridge with 400 militiamen and 79 British. And before that, that was in April. In March, there were things happening, but nothing to that extent. In fact, on that day, as I learned from the guide, they weren't even expecting to shoot. They actually had to put new flints in their rifles. And the way they know that is that 100 fresh flint or used flint were in a pile at the top of the hill where the militia were standing, American militia. And the order had been given for them to skin their flints, where I didn't even know what skin flint came from, but skin flint means you're taking a flint and taking the skin off so it's fresh, otherwise it might not fire. And if it doesn't fire, well, shame on you because they're firing at you, right? But none of those folks, those 400 people, were actually there prepared to shoot. Otherwise they would have had fresh flint already. So they skinned their flints, they fired. And more interestingly, just from the gun standpoint, there were only 3 people that got shot after all of those guns went off. But in March of 1775, it didn't look that way. And then after that, different. January of 1918, which is, again, fascinating that it's like about 100 years ago, we had another pandemic and people didn't treat it very well. And in February, it was worse. And here we are today in February of 2020. So I think about this because something so amazing happened, and we brilliant people with brains that are different than all mammals miss it. So how do we anticipate it? How can we ever anticipate it? How do we keep ourselves fresh on this? Liam's on this presentation, and Liam wouldn't have an answer to that. So, we can all call Liam. But how would we ever anticipate this? What's the scenario planning? What do we should be looking for? How do we not lull ourselves into complacency? Second, if we can anticipate it, can we plan for it? Could you plan for all these scenarios? You might not spend money on it, but could you plan it as contingency planning? And then the biggest piece in terms of what do you want to do with this? Could we actually exploit it? If we knew what we know now, back in February of 2020, what would we have done differently? And how would we have exploited it? How do we do that next time? And I know we're all still sitting in the midst of businesses that are still trying to get back up and running because our supply chains have broken everywhere. But that's yet another question, right? How is your supply chain managing for contingencies? You got it skinny down to the lowest cost, but what are you paying in terms of redundancies or abilities to be in business after that? All right, that's my riff. Now let's ask you these questions. So Lori's with me on this one. I really want to get a feel for this. If you remember and were with us last year, we did a whole series of managing with uncertainty. So how do you do marketing in uncertain times, right? And we asked a bunch of questions of folks just to see, take a pulse. Where are you? How are you feeling about this stuff? And we haven't done that for about 6 months. So I'd love to have you take a little poll here. So Lori, can you put up this one if you have it? I feel more comfortable with and more capable with unpredictability now, and or I feel less comfortable. Please make it stop than in 2019. And Lori, I can't see the polls, so if you would just leap in there and tell me when they're up. Lori, would you speak? Because I can't tell if it's up or not.
All right. Yep, it's up, and it looks like participation has ended. So sharing the results now. And looks like 73% is more comfortable now than they were in 2019.
How practice helps. And that is a really large number relative to what we saw in the April, May, June timeframe of last year. We probably had 79% of people saying, I don't know what to do, and I don't know what I'm going to do. Okay. So good to see. All right. Next one. How are you feeling about travel? This is important for us actually, because we're trying to figure out how to do offerings next year. And we're just trying to get a sense of where people are either in their personal choices or because their companies are restricting travel. So are you currently traveling for work as much as you are in the pre-pandemic period? Are you traveling, but only for essential things like customer or supply chain or projects? You're not traveling yet, but you expect to travel maybe in the beginning of next year. I expect to start, this is the fourth one, I expect to start traveling again without restrictions sometime in 2022, or I'm not even sure if I'll ever travel again, which is totally okay. Would you do those for us?
All right, yes, that pulls up, and I'm going to share the results now. Looks like 42% says they're traveling for work, but only essential customers or projects.
That's okay. Go ahead, give me the other one.
I was going to say 21% says they expect to start traveling for work again without restrictions in early 2022.
And I've figured out why I don't see the polls. Somehow this thing thinks I'm logged in somewhere else. I don't know where that would be, but can't fix that from here. So thank you for being there for me, Lori. All right, let's go to the next one. Okay, so this one's interesting, and mostly it's my curiosity more than anything, but I'm very curious about where we're going now that we've, I could imagine that if the pandemic had only lasted 2 or 3 months, let's just say that for all the optimism that we had, and we kept saying it's going to be over soon, it's going to be over soon, it was actually over somewhere in like May of 2020. I don't know that we'd be having this conversation about working from home. I think we really had to force that issue for making people be there for a long time, and now we're here. So the question is, how are you feeling about where you work? On the left side, I'm 100% working from home, and I prefer it. Or maybe I'm 100% working from home and I want to go back to the office at least part of the time. On the other end of the spectrum, at the bottom of the choices, I'm 100% working from the office and I prefer it, but all right, I'm working from the office and I want to go back to home just at least part of the time. Or somewhere you're in the between. I'm working from home and I prefer it, or I'm mostly from home and I want to go back to the office, or I'm working from my office and I really want to go back. So give me those answers. Let me see what we've got.
Polls are still coming in on this one, so just
there's a lot to think about there. So totally a lot to think about there. I'm see if I can figure out what device it thinks I'm connected to.
All right, looks like it is slowed. This one's kind of all over the board. 27% are 100% from home. 15 are back in the office at least part of the time. 33% are working from home and prefer it. 12 are mostly from home and want to go back to the office at least part-time. And then the last couple, we have no answers of anybody working 100% from the office and want to go back from home at least part of the time.
I think that looks a lot different than what it would have previously. So now I'm going to ask you to think about what the future looks like, because again, if I had asked this question in February of 2020, it would seem like a silly question, probably. Where do you think you'll be next March of 2022? Are you going to be primarily working from home, primarily working from the office, working between them, which means halvesies, right? Primarily means one day a week I'm in the other place. Working flexibly between them means it's really you choose and you don't have one set day. That's very, or maybe you're retired and you're not doing that. Let's see what that one looks like.
All right, the polls are still coming in on this one, but right now it is primarily working from home. That's at 48%. And
Wow.
then we have 10 that are primarily working from the office. But then there's another 35% that are working flexibly between the two.
Yeah, honestly, I think this feels right to me. I wish I had had these opportunities years ago when I was working from an office, but I think that's all been a good thing. Okay. Thanks for sharing that with me, and thanks for participating to give us some information about what's coming. We'll have another conversation when Rand talks about some input for our marketing excellence team about the travel and where you guys are at. So now I'm going to move over and talk about ISBM a bit and what we've been doing. So in the last year, we've put a few things together. One is this B2B mastery assessment. So one of the things we looked at when we looked back at why our members are here and how our members have taken advantage of ISBM membership and what has been useful for them, we look at this kind of cyclical behavior of our membership, where we have members that join us that are really at the very, very beginnings of their marketing excellence journey. They recognize that they need better marketing, they need better processes, they need better capabilities, they might need even just to understand what they need. And understanding that that's really the question is what makes a good B2B marketing organization? We have the answer to that. So we put it together in a structure, which we had done over the years. Rand will tell you that they've done that at DuPont when he was at DuPont. I did it when we were at Word Corporation, Becky and I, to really get a feel for what were we missing in order to be better at what we do, putting the processes in place. And so now we have a tool that allows you to do this assessment. This assessment is free to our membership. And with this assessment, we can identify the gaps that you might have and where you might want to try and fill the gaps and improve them. So we advise you to take advantage of that if you haven't already. The second is that we created, instead of a series of courses and a curriculum that you could take, we put them all together, knowing that it's hard sometimes to figure out how to schedule all those things and get them all in the right order and make that happen. And that we really, really do value how we teach a course with what you're working on today. So you bring the projects of what you do as your job into the work of the course itself. And so they're called workshops as you get the work done while you learn. So we built this all together and rolled it out in this year, 2021. So we had the very first B2B track. And we give you a certificate of mastery because you've pretty much done a consolidated study in B2B marketing once you've done these four sets of courses, right? And we have 4 amazing faculty, Dr. Bob Thomas, Dr. Liam Fahey, Jerry Katz, and Dr. Ralph Oliva. And together, these 4 people are like an amazing collection, and you would have never been able to go to any one of them. They're not even in the same organizations to do that, but we brought them all together. We had 15 people, which was our maximum, go through the process and finish and get their certificates. And I encourage you to take a look at this. If one of your gaps that you identify from the other one is that your folks need more of structure, this is the way to get them there. We're going to have a marketing excellence roundtable a little later this month, October 28th. You will probably want to send a representative if you haven't already signed one up. Miranda's going to talk about this a little bit later, but we're going to be talking about attrition or attraction and your war for talent. Boy, that's become an unexpected challenge here at the pandemic. Intentional learning, the 3x3 approach. And then we'd like to get some feedback for the 2022 curricula that we're going to be putting together and the track certification series. I'll remind you that we've been fairly active on LinkedIn these days and would encourage you to join us there for more information. We send out information to you in a couple of ways, and we know it's hard to keep up with all of that. We are not the only person putting things in your inbox. Totally get that. And we try to only do that a little bit, like once a week, and send you some information. And we know that our open rates are kind of low, so we don't expect you to open everything, but we are hoping that we're still communicating. So another way to get that same information is to go to LinkedIn, and that's kind of on a feed yourself instead of us pushing it to you. And you can see what we're talking about there, and we invite you to join the conversation. So what's next? In addition to the Marketing Excellence Roundtable, we have on November 3rd, an amazing jam session. It's a one-day, just a few hour session with an amazing woman. Ghislaine Collette, professor, has been working for a couple of decades in how you can build trust virtually. This was pre-pandemic, she's been working on it. And we discovered her through one of our educators. And it is phenomenal what she can teach. So when we start having these conversations about, you know, I can't go back to see a customer, but this is a new customer and I need to build a relationship before I can actually get the sale. She would tell you, you can build that relationship without a physical meeting. And she's willing to show us. Now she does this in a lot of one-on-one training. So she's kept the amount of people that can be part of this low. We can only have 15 people in the session. I think there's a couple of spots left. I would encourage you, if you or your teams do sell directly to key accounts, this would be a great thing. If you and your teams are trying to manage across the world virtually and be leaders across the world, this would be a great session. So I encourage you to go and sign up. We're limited to 15. And then the day later of that, we have a woman who's going to talk to us about the 5 planks of door opening success. So it's a little bit like this, but more interesting to me. It is how to get to a conversation with somebody at the top of an organization and you don't know anybody there. Does that sound familiar? That sounds like a very familiar. We really need to talk to who knows someone there. She's got that for you. And she's got a company that will do it for you, but she's going to teach you how to do it. She's going to teach you what she does in that webinar. So I hope you'll join that. In the meanwhile, you'll be getting calls from Rand, if you haven't already, to ask you about a member planning call for next year, making sure that we understand what you as a member need so we can make sure we fulfill that if you're with us. I'll remind you that you can always go to the library and B2B Pulse and see our weekly happenings and visit isbm.com. So Ralph the other day was talking to me and we meet regularly, weekly anyway. And this phrase, Ralph has a couple of pithy things. This one totally resonated. What you really need in chaotic time is friends. And if you just ponder that for just a second, almost that feels like that is exactly what we need in chaotic times. We need friends. So if you've been with us for a while, know Ralph is all about the friends that you make at ISBM. And we recycle this old Dilbert from 1992. In that same phrase where Dilbert gets to be in marketing, and we don't talk about a 2-drink minimum, although if we were in person, there might be. Instead, we talk about our 3-friend minimum. So while we haven't been able to be physically together, we've been trying to encourage that. I encourage you to visit us during the breaks. We'll have the system open so you can talk to people and see if you can make some friends while you're here. A friend is defined as somebody who'll take your call on a Friday afternoon because you have a presentation on Monday and you just need someone to help you out for that. That's a friend. So we hope you'll find some friends here. You always have that with the staff at ISBM. Please reach out to us and we'll connect you if we can. And so some new friends, Green Tweed has joined us in the last, since the last meeting. And in the last year, I also include all of our friends who've joined us just in the last year. So I'm sorry to all these friends that I haven't been able to shake your hand and talk to you face to face, but hopefully soon, as we keep saying, hopefully soon for the last 20 months, hopefully soon. Okay, why frameworks? As I mentioned a little bit earlier, we went down this path of frameworks because we were talking to Lara Patterson, and now I've run over, oh my gosh. So let me get to this faster. Frameworks are basic, they're fundamental. They are the flea to the familiar. When I don't know what else to do, let me get out a framework. Let me see if I can put this information in a pattern, as you saw me do earlier. Some way to hold on to something predictable. It gives me a solid grounding or a firm scaffold to build on. And it lets me incorporate this into my organizations. Frameworks are so critical to our organizational minds that we need to make sure we revisited them. And as we did this collection of presentations, we start recognizing how critical they are to, one, make sure we know them, and to two, be aware that we still need more. So here's our agenda for the next 2 days. I'm going to click through really quickly and just remind you that at 10:30, you should bring your mug and drink some coffee with us, and I'll answer questions about ISBM. And that at lunchtime today, Ralph is going to rip on some frameworks because he's with us. So we're going to watch his presentation and he's going to take questions. At 2:30, we're going to have a chocolate tasting. If you haven't eaten it already, please bring that and we'll do that. And we'll learn about coffee and some other things from Jeff and Bella. And we have a presentation that you will not want to miss because a member company is going to tell us where they've been. And we love when that happens. So join us at 3:15. And right after that, we're going to wrap up. And I'm encouraging you to stay because at 4:15, if you are with me and live and not just having your computer on and letting it be open, I will be giving away a free class along with some books and some chocolate and some other things. We're going to have a raffle, but you have to be present to win. You have to respond to me. So that means you've stayed with me for the whole day at least, I hope. So I'll see you at 4:15 for that.
Hey, Lynn, can I jump in here a sec?
Sure.
In regards to the schedule today, I think when the invite went out or when the confirmation went out or whatever on your calendar, it shows ending at 3:30 or so. But in reality, we are ending at 3:15. You will not want to miss the Marmon presentation. It's going to be about their journey towards their own strategic marketing framework, and they're going to reveal that framework for your learning and talk about how they got there. So I hope that people will stay around extra time for that.
Yeah. Hopefully you don't want to miss that one. Absolutely. Then my last thing is, how do you work with Zoom? So you've been with me for this last half hour, so you probably know something. We're taking questions in the chat window during the presentations. If you want to ask a question verbally, happy to have you do that. Just raise your hand. Lori and I will be monitoring both of those to make sure we understand if anybody wants to ask a question. Most presenters would like their questions at the end, but if there's something that comes in the chat window, I will field it to them as appropriate. And I'm going to get ready now to introduce Lara. So if you want to, you can also write down these 2 phone numbers just in case technology fails you completely. You can call or text Lori if you have a problem, or you can text to me. I won't answer the phone, but I'll answer a text, or you can email either of us if you have any issues. Just let us know. All right, so let me introduce Lara. I'm going to stop sharing so Lara can get hers up. Lara is the president of Vision Edge Marketing and the recognized and trusted authority for enabling companies to take customer-centric, outcome-based approaches to organic growth, enabling them to use analytics, accountability, alignment, and operational excellence to attract, retain, and grow the value of their customers. Lara has been in this for more than 25 years, and she began in sales and had the great fortune of working across a lot of functions, including customer relation management, strategic and product marketing, analytics, and marketing operations. And she has been at the helm of Vision and Marketing, which was founded in 1999. Lara received a patent for the excellence methodology that she uses to connect activities, investments to business results. And she has published 4 books. Her latest book is going to be in our gift for raffles at the end, Fast Track Your Business, a customer-centric approach to accelerate market growth. It's a great book, and it really just takes you through everything you want that. She's won a lot of awards, including Ignati's top 30 marketing influencers, the top 200 thought leaders, Pictel's top 100 influencers award, and 20 women to watch in business by the Sales Lead Management Association. Engagio, which is now demand-based, identified Lara as one of the top marketing operations leaders to know. And Lara is extremely dynamic. I look like I've been asleep for the last half hour when you hear her. So I hope you'll enjoy this, Lara. You've got an hour, take it and take it away. And take yourself off mute, or Lori can do it for you.
Hi, everybody. I should be off mute. Can you all see the screen?
We can, and we can hear you. Great.
Awesome. And thank you for having me. Good morning, everyone. And I have to admit, my husband absconded off with one of the chocolate bars. And so but he said it was delicious. All right, I'm going to move this into oh goodness, why am I having trouble here? Where's my view for the whole thing, guys? Slideshow, there we go. Okay, from the beginning. So can you all see that okay? So I want to talk a lot about frameworks today. I have been a proponent of frameworks and a builder of frameworks for a very long time. I'm going to share some that we have built and some that you are familiar with. And I want to understand kind of what you know about frameworks. When we work with our customers, we always try to have them have a framework. And the reason is that allows you to repeat, right? So the key thing is that, as Lynn was saying, is that frameworks give you something that you can flee to for the familiar. And I suspect that many of you are having some of the same challenges our customers are with people. And as a result, as you get new people or you're losing important people that have a lot of knowledge and experience, having a framework can be really valuable. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I'm going to just start with a poll because we are running slightly behind. So Lori's going to put up the poll, and I just want to get a sense of how familiar you are with frameworks. So if you're familiar with a framework, great, that would be 5. If you're not familiar, that would be a 1. So just let us know how familiar you are with business frameworks. Just pick one. Lori, you got some numbers for us?
All right, yes, I'm going to share the slide. And it looks like at least a third, 33% are not familiar at all, 18 are somewhat familiar.
Awesome, that's really helpful. Okay, so that'll be good. We'll keep in mind that we do have some people who are very familiar, but we have a lot of people that this will be a really great opportunity. I do want to let you know that if you are interested in this content, let me know. We have a handout and we'll be happy to send it to you. You can just email me and I'll have some contact information for you shortly. Okay, so next slide. One more poll real quick. So for those of you who are using frameworks, let's pick the ones that apply. Here are frameworks. You can pick all of the above if you're using these frameworks, all of these frameworks. None if you're not using any frameworks, for those of you not using any of these. And then if you are using, pick up several, that would be great. So what kind of frameworks are you using? Frameworks for strategy, for planning, for creating models, for product development, for commercialization, for research, pricing, something else that we hadn't thought of, that would be great. Lori, do we have some numbers? And the survey says?
All right, survey comes in. A little bit of everything. About 25% says none of the above. 17% says all of the above. So we about.
Yeah, okay. Looks like that strategy frameworks are pretty common, and some planning and research frameworks, maybe less so in some of the other areas. Great, good to know. Okay, that's very helpful. So we're going to talk about frameworks, what they are for those people who are not as familiar, some really primary benefits. I'm going to share some examples of marketing frameworks. You probably are familiar with these, but I just want to remind you that these are frameworks. We have 3 frameworks that we use that our customers find really valuable and are quite popular. I'm going to share those with you. One is the Circle of Traction, which is in our new book and something we've been using in our company with our customers for over 20 years. And then going into selecting a framework. For those of you who might not be as familiar and are going to consider looking at a framework, what are some of the things you should keep in mind, and what are some attributes of a good framework? So that's our plan for our time together. Please put your questions in the chat. I can't see the chat, but we'll look at the chat at the very end. Okay, so let's define what a business framework is. A framework captures a process. So if you have a process and you want to be able to make it very repeatable, you more than likely will build out a framework for it. It guides. The framework is a guide for how to operate that process. It's not the process itself, it's the guide for operating that process. And I think that's an important distinction that a lot of people often miss. And it's a way to structure your thinking. And so that has a lot of value in how you build out a framework. It also means that you can change things, because if processes change or information in your world changes, context changes, you may want to modify your framework. But good frameworks allow that kind of flexibility. They allow you to have the ability to adapt. And so that's going to be one of the things we'll talk about. If it's so structured, it breaks with any kind of change, it's probably not a good framework. And we'll look at some that have stood the test of time. There are really 3, in our opinion, of what makes the benefits of a business framework. And we call this, what's in it for you? The first one is its efficiency. I don't know about you guys, but I know that we are running hard and fast. We're a lean organization. We've been a lean organization. Most of our customers run pretty lean, whether it's marketing or some other parts of the organization that we work with, customer success or other teams. And having repeatable processes that you don't have to reinvent the wheel over and over is really important. So efficiency. The second thing, though, that people often don't realize is a very valuable benefit is quality. When you standardize the process, it gives you a framework, gives you a way to have process management. And that's really important for delivering on quality. And I would say that right now there's lots of challenges on consistency and quality, and that has a lot to do with the lack of frameworks. And we're seeing that a lot of breakage or challenges, particularly on the customer success, customer service side, and it has a lot to do with lack of frameworks. And the third is onboarding, bringing on new people and getting them up to speed quickly, especially, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the Great Resignation or the Great Reshuffle that's going on right now. And that means that as critical people are leaving an organization, they take with them important knowledge, right? And so if that's not captured in a framework, then that's lost, and it makes it a lot harder to onboard new people. And even if those people are not leaving, or they're still in their jobs and they're still bringing that value, they're probably really busy. And so having a framework allows new people to be onboarded quickly and brought up the learning curve faster. So those are the 3 biggest benefits of business frameworks. And so if you're wondering whether it's worth the time, worth the investment, worth the effort of a framework, because it does take time to, even if you take one that's already in existence, just bringing it in and integrating it into your organization is an undertaking, and often involves some change management practices. It will, in the long run, certainly be worth it. So I wanted to walk through a few frameworks that probably many of you are already familiar with, maybe even use. This framework for creating and marketing products that people want to buy. This is the pragmatic marketing framework, this one on the far left. Many of you have probably seen it. It's been around for a pretty long time. They have all kinds of content and training around this particular framework to help people deploy it, and a way to kind of look at where things fall into the world of marketing, particularly in product management and product marketing. So this is a framework, and this is an example of a framework. There's a lead gen framework. This is a very common framework in the lead gen world for those of you who work in that space or have people that work in that space. The whole notion of the funnel and how opportunities move through the funnel, how we bring them in the top of the funnel and bring them out at the bottom of the funnel is another example of a framework. And then RACE, the whole RACE framework, all around reach, act, convert, engage, and everything that's in it. This has a lot of nuance to it. You may have a less detailed or complex view of RACE. This is a pretty complex one, but again, really kind of helps you understand and have a repeatable process. So these are three of the most common marketing frameworks that we run into that companies have embraced and are leveraging on a pretty consistent basis. So with that, I wanted to kind of offer up this third poll, which is which of these most applies to with your marketing organization, and I'll read them. Using frameworks is too hard and not worth the energy and effort. We do fine without them. We have found that using frameworks is not easy for us, and we do not employ any. Using frameworks is not easy for us, but we consistently employ them to support the work of marketing. 4, using frameworks is easy, and we are comfortable using them. And 5, using frameworks is very easy, and they are second nature in our organization. They are how we run marketing. They are how we operate. So if you could tell us how that works for you, that would be awesome. Lori, what did we learn?
Still getting some answers. If you want to give it just another second.
Yes.
All right.
Great. Number 1, using frameworks is sure not worth the energy. That's awesome. So it looks like the majority of people are, that's not easy, but we are consistently employing them. Kind of number 3, to support our work. That's sort of the biggest one. And for some people, it is easy. So that's great. Thank you for that. All right. So let's jump into some examples of frameworks that we use that might you might find helpful, that are a little bit different than the 3 that I have brought up, and maybe some of the ones that Ralph and others will be talking about. So we're going to look at 3. Circle of traction, which is well explained in our book and something that our customers, and some of you may who have been our customers have used. Advantage, which is around segmentation. A lot of organizations don't have very good segmentation frameworks, which is a challenge, whether that's customer segmentation or market segmentation. There are some out there. We have one that we'll share with you, and then excellence, which is around performance management, around alignment and accountability. That's one we have a patent for. We won't go into every single detail, but give you enough information. We'll spend a little more time on circle of traction since it's a much bigger type of framework and looks at the business in a very broad way. And advantage and excellence are very specific to the kinds of things that they do. So with that, let's talk about customer-centric growth. So in the B2B world, which is where we spend the majority of our time and where I spent the majority of my career, it's easy to get enamored with the products and solutions that we build. We make very cool things. And so it's important to remember that, in the words of Peter Drucker, the purpose of business is to create a customer. And so it's all about the customer, and that the customer and what we are thinking about in terms of our business, we must always keep the customer front and center in every decision that we make. And that's what it means to be customer centric, is that the customer is front and center and in part of every decision that we make. And we don't make decisions without the customer as the context. So if you think about your own company right now, there's a lot of challenges for many organizations, particularly in the B2B world, that make things that might be having supply chain challenges. I spent a good portion of early in my career, at 14 years of my 20 plus year corporate career at Motorola. I know some of you know that in the semiconductor space. And I am quite familiar with the feast and famine cycle of semiconductors and what it is to be on allocation with a product for various reasons. And I'm trying to make customer-centric decisions about who is going to get a product, knowing that people who don't get a product will ultimately potentially be lying down. And if you've ever been to a customer factory that is lying down, you know that's a really uncomfortable moment in time to walk into a factory that is lying down and people are not there, they're not working because your product is not available to them. And so having a way to do customer-centric growth and having a framework for that is really essential. It's very critical for every business. So I'm going to introduce the circle of traction to you. Some of you have already seen it. Those of you who have fast track, thank you for that. We appreciate it. This is what the circle of traction looks like. And it seems very intuitive. And good frameworks do have some intuitive aspect to them. It makes sense, right? If it doesn't make sense, that wouldn't work. So the very beginning of this is circle of traction is a wheel. And the axle is in the center. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then we have these spokes or nodes that go around the wheel. And it is about moving from one spoke to the next in a particular order. And that is the key thing about all frameworks, is that they do have structure to them. They are structuring your thinking, and therefore the order in which you do them is important. Kind of like if you were building a house, you know, you don't put the roof on until you have the walls up, and you don't put the walls up until you have the foundation, right? And so there is a particular order, and this is true with the circle of traction. And so the value of this wheel and the value of any wheel is to harness energy. Most organizations right now that we are working with, they have a sense of exhaustion. They have been working really, really hard, and the pandemic has exhausted all of us. So you want to find ways to harness energy and remove friction, facilitate movement and magnify force. That is the whole beauty of any wheel. And that is what our customers have found to be the beauty of circle of traction. So let's take a quick look at that. And it all begins with the axle. The axle has 4 components: organizational structure and culture, people and skills, infrastructure, process and tools, and data and analytics. So the axle is fundamental. The wheel can't turn without them. And this is an important point that I want to make, is that, again, every framework, there are certain things you're just going to have, or they won't work, regardless of everything else that you're trying to do. And so the data and tools that we have inside organization are only as good as your people and their skills. And right now, MarTech, marketing technology, is extraordinarily pervasive. I think the last I heard is that the average company has 20 different technology tools, many of which are very data oriented. And so lots and lots of technology, lots and lots of tools, but still for the most part, when we work with our customers, they're still very challenged around the data and measurement front. And a lot of that has to do with people and their skills, but it also has to do with the fact that they perhaps have a thinking that the automation is going to replace the critical thinking that you need in order to grow. And that's not true. You've got to have really good people, and they have to have good skills. So the first place you start on our wheel is with the customer, because if you're going to be customer centric, you need insights which come from your data, because data is the currency today. And that this is your insight supply chain. So if we're talking about supply chain, I just want to know that there's a thing that we call the insights supply chain. And that requires you to not only have data, but to be that you get from easy sources or easier sources that might come from your marketing automation platform, but also from things that are more like traditional research, where you test in a hypothesis. And one of the things we've noticed is that people have gotten less predisposed to doing the heavy lifting of real research, customer research, market research, really need to do that. It isn't all going to come to us through social media, through feedback, in transactional feedback that we're having. So that's another, that's important. And also competitive intelligence. Again, I have found that a lot of companies have maybe not elevated the role of competitive intelligence as much as they need to. It's kind of just sort of sitting out there. And that is a very, very important data stream that you need for your insights supply chain. So the more you obviously that you can quantify how your solution makes a difference, the better. And I know that Rob always talks about the value and value proposition, and that all comes from starting with your insight supply chain. So that's the very first thing, customer insights, spoke one. Once we understand that, it's really key to being able to define success in customer-centric quantifiable terms. And when we are talking with our customers, we find that people tend to put things in terms of revenue or in terms of some other financial number. It's really essential, if you're going to be customer-centric, whatever framework you choose, is to put it in customer-centric quantifiable terms. Which customers, which markets, how many, what is it that they are going to buy from you and when? Not in vague goals, really work the numbers. Ramping up leads, expanding into existing markets, these are not good outcomes. These are not quantifiable customer-centric terms, so targets. So I think that's something that if you don't take anything away, we're moving into planning season for a lot of organizations. These first two spokes are really critical to as we think about the coming calendar year's plan. Okay, now we can talk about innovation and strategy. This is where we find that a lot of people start. They want to start with innovation, they want to start with strategy, but truly we have to start with the other two spokes first. Empowered customers are shaping our strategy. Today, the customer is in charge. So you want to be able to be thinking about how you're going to measure and the strategy you're going to put in place. These are going to become the bets you're going to make to protect or gain customers and market share and own your category, expand your share of wallet, grow customer lifetime value, and accelerate the adoption of new products and services, right? And strategy, it dictates everything. It decides what resources, what offers, what processes, what capabilities you need to compete. And Lynn alluded to this earlier, talking about the use of scenario analysis, a really great methodology for you to kind of walk through the what ifs. We have a company in Texas known as HEB. It's a grocery store. It's very well regarded. And they do an amazing job with scenario analysis. And they had already ran a scenario around the notion of a pandemic. They never skipped a beat starting in March of last year, not one time, never skipped a beat. And that had a lot to do with the fact that they had done this work in advance and they had anticipated and had a plan. So I think that if those of you, it takes time to do good scenario analysis, but it is really worthwhile. And then in this same spoke is the notion of customer-centric innovation and differentiation. It's really hard if we don't think about product market fit, which is the ultimate expression of customer centricity, and then innovation. We find, folks have ideas, but they don't necessarily do, again, the heavy lifting of validating them in the marketplace, testing them, right? And then getting traction and penetration and domination, setting real targets around them and understanding that there is a cadence to achieving growth with innovation. For many of our customers, their future depends on things that are in their innovation pipeline today. And if that's your case, then this is probably a really valuable kind of framework for you to be thinking about. All right, next up is segmentation and positioning. Again, for many of our customers, they oftentimes put this way too early in their process. It goes here. after all the other things, right? It matters if you want to affect market penetration and domination. So if you're in, you got to understand what the customer wants, why they want to buy from you, and why they want to buy from you now, how you're going to measure your success, what you're going to be bringing to market, and then looking at the different ways you can segment in order to get really good traction, penetration, and domination. And this is where positioning and sort of brings your mission and your promise to life. Okay, we're in spoke 5. I know I'm going quickly, but we only have a little bit of time, and I want to just make sure I stay on track. So the customer journey, I know we've been talking about the customer journey for quite a while now, and we all talk about it. And this goes back to the empowered customer. The customer is in charge of the journey that they are making now. They are investigating their, what is their problem? It starts with understanding what is their problem and what they talk to peers. They do Google searches to investigate potential solutions. They identify the approach that they want to take. So here we are, we're doing all kinds of things with content and everything else to try to, be in the investigative stage. And yet at this point in time, they're really not ready to buy. They're just exploring the problem and the various solutions. They're trying to identify their best course of action. When they move into evaluate, select, and decide, that's where we need to really be on top of our game. We have to be out there and investigate and identify. We have to be discoverable. They have to be able to find us. We have to be able to articulate our solution in the right category so that if they choose that category, we will be in the mix. But then when they get into evaluate, select, and decide, we really have to be at the top of our game. And then ultimately with purchase, community, and advocacy, which comes, customer loyalty, customer referral. So their behavior provides clues as to where they are. And the journey, their journey, should be laying the foundation for our internal processes and how we score opportunities in our systems. We often find that our customers are scoring things based on their process, and if you could flip that around and build your scoring methodologies around the customer journey, that will be better, especially in the B2B world, because the B2B world, from our perspective, is usually a consultative sell with longer sales cycles that are much more complex buying cycles, much more complex products. And so that's kind of important. So you want to create customer-centric outcomes-based plans here that are going to connect those activities. I'll talk a little bit about excellence in a moment. And just remember that a plan is only as effective as its execution. And that is what takes us to the next one, which is operational excellence. So execution, right? It's all about execution. We're kind of back to process. It's backbone of every function. Business runs on processes. Marketing runs on processes. If we don't have our processes well documented, well defined, we don't understand how they work. We don't know how to make them more effective, more efficient. If they are constantly breaking, that's going to be an issue. So process is really important. People is the primary secret ingredient when it comes to operational excellence. And of course, we have to have the systems and tools. But I can tell you, having been around for a very long time, the tools again, the systems again, are only as good as the people that you have and the processes that you put in place. So putting systems and tools without the process and people will get you nowhere. And so this is where operational excellence becomes important. And then that allows us to be thinking about the last thing, which will inform everything else we do, which is how we're going to measure what metrics and KPIs we're going to use. And do we have the logic chains, the links that are between the work that we're doing and the money that we're spending and the results that we're producing? That's really important. So scorecards, dashboards, data visualization all become really important so we can make better decisions and know what kinds of questions we want to be able to start asking. So back to the beginning of the wheel, what new questions do we need to answer about our market, about the competition, about our customers, that will inform us as we continue to move through the wheel. So that is essentially the circle of traction. And hopefully that gives you an idea of a possible framework that you might employ or look for something similar that will help you with that approach for how you're going to run marketing and have customer-centric growth. So now we have customer-centric growth, and we want to talk a little bit about segmentation, because we don't market to buckets of revenue. And we can't market to everyone. We have a brand new customer in the cybersecurity space. We've been in the cybersecurity space since 2002. And so this is space that we know very, very well. Have customer that's coming out and they have a brand new product. It's very, very cool. It's in the zero trust space, really cool technology. They have some customers and they're doing something. One of the first questions we asked is, who are you going to market to? Where's your first point of entry? And the answer was everyone. Okay, I said, well, so you have unlimited amount of money. You can market to everyone, because if money is no object, maybe you can market to everyone. But if you are limited by some funds and people, then odds are you need to be thinking about segments. And so, of course, they don't have unlimited money. They maybe have a pretty big bucket, but it's not unlimited, and it has it's not a never-ending well. So we have an approach for segmentation. There are many other frameworks out there. This is one I'm going to share, and I think Ralph and others will share some other segmentation frameworks over the course of the next day or 2 days. So Donald Norman said, segmentation is the natural result of the vast differences among people. And the goal, obviously, of segmentation is to be able to put buckets of people, not buckets of revenue, but buckets of people together. And that is where we often find is one of the first things that companies can do to be better with frameworks is around segmentation. And segmentation can affect the decisions you make about the products, the decisions you make about going to market, the decisions you make about even, how you are doing marketing, whether that's your email campaigns, creating content, whatever it might be. So we have Advantage. It is a framework that involves attributes, weights, and ranking. And I'll show you an example of it. And it's something that's we can help you set up, or we have a tool that you can use, or you can just try and reinvent it. But it's pretty straightforward. And to Lynn's point, it uses a 2x2, a wonderful framework. So it's the purpose of it is to help you identify the best market and customer segments. It's all based on data, and it allows you to do apples to apples comparisons. This is the biggest challenge that we often see for many companies, is that they have ideas about segments, but they don't necessarily compare those segments apples to apples to each other. And so as a result, it gets to be more anecdotal, or it gets to be about who knows somebody in those segments, or who they've worked with before, or various other things. There are two axes, of course, in a 2x2. The first is the vertical, which is opportunity, which is all about, is the market large enough to warrant pursuit or investment? And the second is, which is the horizontal axis, is all about accessibility. How hard or easy will it be to access the segment? That's the key thing. So really, that's the two most important questions. There are sub questions you can ask, but these are the two most important questions to begin asking about customers and markets. And so it might look like this. And this is an actual customer. And in our approach, what we do is we establish criteria for each one of these axes. We establish a weight for that criteria. It must reach, add up to 100 when you add up all of the values for that criteria. And then we establish what we call attributes. And those attributes have a ranking, a 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever those might be. And through the research that we do on every segment, we are able to create scores for those segments and look at them in this 2x2 window. The upper right-hand quadrant being great opportunity, highly accessible, we call that optimum, or in the upper left-hand window, which is, it's a good opportunity, but maybe not as easy to get to. The lower right being, it's very easy to get to, but maybe not the best opportunity. And then the lower left being unfit. It's not easy to get to, and it's not a good opportunity. And so this particular company, you can see how their segments, as we evaluated different segments, the automotive segment, the mining segment, the aerospace segment, the financial services segment, the oil and gas industry, various industries here and segments where they fell. And this allows you to decide, well, where do you want to go? So this particular company actually thought oil and gas was going to be their best opportunity. And that was where they were starting to think that was where they were headed. And it became apparent that there were some other segments that might be better choices for market entry with this particular product. That takes me to alignment and accountability, our last framework, and then we'll talk about considerations for a framework and selecting a framework. I want to make sure we get there and have time for a few questions. So this is, we have a patent around excellence. It is a pretty unique approach to creating what we call a direct line of sight between work and investments and specific business results. It's applicable beyond marketing, but we find that marketing people use it the most because this is what marketing gets the most pushback, right? On what is it that you've done for the business. We can show oftentimes a lot of numbers in marketing. We can show a lot of measures in marketing, but making that direct connection between the work and the money and the results can be sometimes more challenging for marketing. Pretty easy in sales, right? Much easier. And so the secret ingredient inside excellence is what we call logic chains, which are basically chains that are comprised of related measures that link from the top to the bottom. And so not only is it a great way for measuring, but it's a really great way for facilitating alignment because it helps you see where the activity, which is where we're working, really hard every single day, where those fit into the overall or into the big picture. And I'll kind of show you what it kind of looks like here. Visually, this is sort of an illustration. What is the business outcome in those customer-centric quantifiable terms? Are customer-centric measurable objectives? So outcomes take more than one, it take two or more functions to produce. So could be sales and marketing, could be product and marketing, could be customer support and marketing, could be customer support and sales, whatever it is. Could be HR and IT and marketing. Just depends. And then the specific objective for your organization and the strategy that you're going to deploy to bring that objective to life. So it's very similar in many of the ways that people do planning, but it is very hierarchical and it has, again, a very specific process. And everything has performance targets and measures associated with it. So the links become quite evident and you can see that visually. It allows you then to ultimately create the chains that convert into scorecards and dashboards. So it lays the foundation for that kind of work. So there are planning frameworks out there, various different ones. This is an example of one, and I think people will probably talk about another one or two over the course of the next couple of days. We find that a lot of people think they have planning frameworks, but they really don't. They just make PowerPoints with names on them, like here's our objective and a strategy and a program. And at the end, there's an Excel worksheet with a budget, and maybe there's a calendar of key activities. So it's not really a planning framework. It's just a PowerPoint document. Okay, so let's talk about selecting a framework, and then we'll have time for questions. So there are 6 attributes of any good framework, and we hope ours meet those requirements. But if not, then there's others out there that might. First, it should provide structure and scope. That is really important. So when you're looking at a framework and you're deciding whether or not to adopt one, you want something that will provide structure and scope. It should be based on the value stream that you are trying. So that's really important. And I know that ISBM has talked about value streams over the years, and I think many of you are very familiar with that concept. So you want that to be really important. Where are you generating value in your organization, and will the framework help you do a better job of that? It should be adaptable. It should fit your organization's culture and situation. So it needs to be structured, but not so structured that you can't use it. So you want one that will fit your culture and your context. It should have tools to support your processes in it. So if it doesn't come with some tools, that's something that you might want to think about, because the last thing you want to do is have to create those tools. There's just no time to do that. It should have predefined definitions and guidelines and help you create a common language. We find that vocabulary is oftentimes one of the biggest challenges many organizations have. So you want to have frameworks that have a common language that will enable you to be more agile in an organization. And lastly, it should make things simpler for you and your team. If it's making things harder, more complex, more complicated, more difficult, it's not a good framework. So those are the things that you might think about if you're looking at it for some frameworks as you head into the next calendar year, or you want to modify or change your frameworks. Here's 6 things to think about. And that takes us into 6 considerations. And I framed these in terms of questions. I think that's maybe the best way to think about the considerations. Will the framework have leadership support? This is a really important consideration. And that's one reason I shared these 3 that of our frameworks. We have others, but these 3 really get solid C-level support because they're very understandable and they're positioned in terms of the business. So the more you can position things in terms of the business, the better it will be to get leadership support. Second one, how much time will it take for your team or you to learn the framework? If it's going to be something that's going to take 2 years, who has 2 years? No one has 2 years right now to learn a new framework. And then sort of where does the framework fit into your organization's maturity and priorities? If you've got a very mature organization, maybe a different kind of framework you're going to need than if you're, in the earlier stages of your development. And then also your priorities. Third, does the framework help your younger talent come up the learning curve? This is a really important consideration, especially right now. Just was in a conversation with a longtime associate. He worked at Dell when I worked at Motorola together. We've known one another about 25 years. He has his own firm. I have Vision Edge Marketing. And we've been talking about some younger talent, and he has like 8 positions open inside his organization. And one of the biggest challenges he's having is learning curve. That is one of the biggest challenges. So he wanted to talk to me about frameworks to help start bringing some of these people that he's been onboarding up some learning curves faster. And so that's been a big issue. And I've heard that more than once, but this was just a conversation on Monday. As your people learn the fundamentals of the framework, can they put it into practice? So it's one thing to learn it and they sort of conceptually get it, but can they actually deploy it? And that's an important consideration. Is there documentation to support the framework? So back to that pragmatic marketing example, slews of documentation. They have done an extraordinary job with that particular framework as an example, and lots of training, lots of tools, all of that. And the last question that, there can be many more questions. These are just the 6 that I think you want to be sure you can answer right out of the gate, is how will you know the framework is being adopted and whether it's serving its purpose? So you want to think about that before you put something in place. How will you know that it's being adopted is a really key thing. I think we all know what it's like to have bought software that sits on the shelf, shelfware, for example. Investing in a framework, you don't want that to be something that's sitting on a shelf, and you do want it to serve its purpose. So those are the 6 considerations and attributes of a framework. So I think I have just like 10 minutes. I know I went quickly, but I want to make sure we do have time for a conversation. I miss that. That's one of the challenges I find with Zoom is that I don't have that opportunity for the same level of interaction. I would like to take some questions. I would also like to hear back from you. What's one takeaway or new idea? And I'd love you to write that down, but I'd also love for you to share it because, we're all in a room together. If we were all in a room together, we would be having that conversation and people would be talking about that. So I don't want this just to be one of those like silent movies. And I'm talking and you're silent. So I'd like to know if you took something away, or even if you didn't, I'd like to know that too. And then something that you think you'll do differently. I'd love for them to know if you're going to do something differently and write it down, because I find that if people write something down, they're more likely to do something about it when they go back to the ranch, as we say here in Texas, than if they don't write it down. So I'd like to open up the conversation. I'd like to hear from you. I'll pause and drink my coffee. Thank you again, Lynn, Lori, and Rand for that, and open up the conversation to you guys. So questions, one takeaway or new idea, if someone's willing to be bold and courageous and something that you'll do differently, I would love to hear that.
Great. I'm going to echo that, Laura. I have that same problem that I really have a hard time with these little screens. I can't see people's faces when I'm talking to them. I have no idea if I'm getting through or what, but
Yes.
if I add more screens to my house, maybe I can do that. I can have multiple screens and see everybody. So we do have some questions coming in. I do want to encourage you, because we can capture the chat, that you can answer Lara by just sending to me one of those things. I'm going to do differently, or these are the things I'm going to try, or this is what I got, or this is what I would like to see different. Just type it into the chat. I can see the difference between that and a question, and we'll capture that, and we'll be able to get that from Lara. You also now have her email address. You can talk to her directly there, and she'd love to hear from you. So we had,
and if you found this valuable and you want material, we have a handout. Email me and I will email the handout to you in a PDF.
Wonderful. So we had, our first question came in from Melissa Rumler. And Melissa, if you would like to unmute and just ask the question correctly, I think it was a great question, but you probably have a specific question about it. So would you like to ask the question, Melissa? Not hearing. Okay, so I'm going to say it for her. So her question was, at the beginning, when you were talking about setting these goals and making sure your goals are customer centric. So your corporation sets goals. You know, we can't always teach everybody to do whatever we want, right? How can you ensure that you've made them customer centric? Is there some way to like tease it out and make it more customer centric without ticking off the top?
Yes, that is such a great question. And also a common challenge, Melissa. So most of the time the goals are framed in, we want $300 million in revenue next year. And maybe you'll hear something like, this business unit, we want them to do 100 million, and this business unit, we want them to do, 50 million, and this business unit, 50 million, and this other business unit, 100 million, right? That's not uncommon. But that doesn't tell us anything in marketing. That is of really no value. So the conversation, this is an opportunity to move from being a campaign producer or sales enabler into a true value creator or growth creator marketing organization by serving as an advisor, right? Becoming an advisor and sitting across the table and say, awesome, this business unit leader wants $100 million. Let's talk about the kinds of customers that you would like to have and how many of them that you need, and which of your solutions you believe will be the best opportunities for you to achieve that $100 million. It's a strategic conversation. And the next important question that we often forget to ask in marketing is, what is it you want from us to move the ball down the field or to move the needle? What do you expect from the marketing organization to help you get those numbers, right? Because oftentimes it's not clear, and we just often doing things because we want to be of value. And the next key thing is, how will you know that we did? That will inform your objective. You will know what you need to do to move the ball down the field, and you will know how you're going to measure that. And that will allow you to write a marketing objective. So you'll be able to get them to say, oh, we need, I'll make this up. We need 50 of our existing customers to, buy X number, renew their licenses. Let's say it's a software thing. Renew their licenses. And we need 20 brand new customers in this market because we believe that's where we're going next in order to grow. And so we need 20 new customers in segment X, and we need them to adopt this particular solution because that's going to allow us to get access into a new market. And so that's a different conversation, right? So now you know two things that you didn't know, and those two things together are going to make up our $100 million, right? That's the kind of conversation you want to have. And we encourage you, if you don't get them to tell you, make it up and ask it back and say, here's what we're thinking. And they'll say, what were you guys drinking when you put those outcomes together? No, it's not 50 of our existing customers that are going to renew. It's 150. Oh, wow. Okay. That's a big, right? So start, if they don't know, and they might not know, they might not actually know because they might not know the data, but I imagine that they do have the data. This data exists in all systems. Right? It may not be in the marketing systems, but I assure you it's in the financial systems. They know who their customers are. They know what those customers are buying, and they know how much money those customers spent, right? They know that. So get that information and use that to your advantage in the conversation. Don't go in empty-handed, go in with some ideas of what's going on in the marketplace. That's back to understanding your data. Melissa, I hope that answered your question. If not, hit me up again. What's the next one?
Okay, on the outcome-based mapping template, can you elaborate on the difference between business outcome and measurable objective?
Yes, great question. So a business outcome, as is an outcome, is a target. I'm going to use the word target that requires 2 or more functions in the organization to achieve. 2 or more. It could be sales and marketing. It could be product and sales, product and marketing, all 3 of them. 2 or more functions, and it doesn't have to be. It could be a business outcome that has to do with HR and technology. It could be any number of things, right? I'm just sticking to marketing, sales, customer support, and product marketing because that's what I know. But that doesn't mean that that's all that a company might need to have as an outcome. The objective is for your function. So sales will have an objective, marketing will have an objective, and product will have an objective that tie to that outcome. So each function will have something they're expected to do and achieve that will move the needle. So try to envision that. Imagine that picture I showed you gets converted into a dashboard for a moment. Could you see that? Could you see how those boxes become gauges? Maybe they're round or maybe they're square with numbers on them. And the top numbers, the outcome, imagine that number is moving to the right. Just follow me for a moment. And you're in marketing and you have an objective, but your numbers are not moving to the right, but that outcome is moving to the right. What would that tell the organization? That would tell the organization a couple of things. A, somebody else in the organization is moving those numbers, right? Or B, and we're not in marketing, or we are contributing to the movement of those numbers, but we have picked the wrong things to measure. We would know that. So now imagine that those outcome numbers are not moving to the right. They're just stuck. But our marketing objective numbers are moving to the right. What would that tell the organization? Well, it might tell us that some of the other functions are not holding up their end of the bargain. They're not doing their job, even though we're making our numbers. Or we're making our numbers, but we're doing the wrong things, right? So that is the value of that framework and why we got a patent, right? That's where it becomes critical. And it goes all the way down. So if all those numbers at the top are moving to the right, but all the numbers on the bottom are not, that's interesting. What if all the things on the bottom are moving to the right, all the things in your activities, but none of the numbers at the top are moving? That's often what happens. That's a really common view. Everything on the bottom is clicking away. You're working really, really hard and you're getting open rates and click-through rates and all this stuff on the bottom, but the top's not moving, right? So that is the difference between, I think I was answering the question of an outcome and an objective, but I wanted you to understand why they are important to distinguish. I hope I answered that question. Next question. How am I doing on time, Lori? I know I'm pushing the limit. I'm sorry.
I started a little late. We got one more I really want to hear you riff on. So is it common that companies short circle the circle of traction?
Well, the first thing that's common is they have no circle of traction. They just are doing, right? There's no framework. That's the most common, right? So if you want to know the most common, that's the most common. There is nothing. They do them, but there is no framework. So you can't skip something that you don't have. So that is the most common. We do find that people want to skip. They do want to skip because, they think they know, or they don't think it's important. But that's like if you cook or bake, skipping ingredients, right? It is going to affect the flavor at the end, right? So you can choose to skip an ingredient, but what would chili be without red pepper, right? Or chili powder? You could skip it, but it probably wouldn't taste as good, but it's edible. So I think you can still do some things and skip it, but it wouldn't be the same. So that if that answers the question. All right, I know there's probably other questions. You can reach out to me. I'll try to look at the chat. I'm going to stick around and I'll look at the chat. But let me stop sharing so that the next person can tee up. Thank you, everybody, for listening in. And I hope I didn't get to hear. Oh, Lynn, I didn't get to hear if anyone took away a good idea or had.
Yeah, let me read a few of them just for you, right? So from Vince Kostelnik, if it's so structured that it breaks with change, it's not a good framework. That's a takeaway. From Tim Wilson, it's a takeaway. Continue to level set new groups by using a framework depending on the topic. From Ralph, key takeaway, frameworks clarify and set common language. It's so important for thinking and implementation. Yep. And so, so we've got 3 takeaways that people came up with. I am sure that people have challenges that they are going to want to ask you about too. So do remember to reach out to Lara. She'll send you her work, her handout as well. Or you can, if you missed it, you can always reach out to us and we'll make sure we connect you. Thanks for staying with us, Lara. Really appreciate it. And starting us off with a lot of energy. That was super awesome. And we're going to go into a break time. That is for the next 30 minutes, well, 25. We're going to have a break. And what we're going to try and do is a coffee break. That is, we hope that you will go find your ISBM mug and fill it with one of the coffees that you might have gotten from us. Later today, we are going to actually have someone who makes these coffees talk to us about how they're made, but we'd love to hear which one you liked or why. Oh God, they smell so good. And then, and later we'll talk about chocolate. So if you'd like to join a conversation, feel free to take yourself off mute and or show yourself in a video. We know a lot of you might have just decided to walk away at this moment because there's things you need to take care of between our sessions, and that is totally fine. But a few of us are going to hang out here and we'd love to chat with you. And if we get enough of us and we have some questions, I'm going to just kind of walk through what it's like to be part of ISBM, answer any questions. I know a lot of you have been members for a while, but if you're not the key member that connects with us all the time, you might have some questions about what resources we have. I'll be happy to answer that and talk about it, or just talk about coffee or weather or anything else you want to hear about, because we're just having a little coffee break and I'd love to hear from you. So anybody want to start in there? Say hello.